I don't know, and this will probably unfold in discussion, what your thoughts are on why free will would account for or justify at least some of the evil and suffering that occurs. But from my perspective, I don't see any inconsistency with a person having free will, exercising their free will, and yet never doing anything evil. And there's a couple reasons why this could be the case. One could, in principle, allow people to have a will whereby they are motivated to do evil things or cause harm to others, but God intervenes and prevents it from happening. But if someone sees that as some sort of restriction on free will, there's another way in which people could have free will and yet never do evil. And this doesn't result in any sort of contradiction. It doesn't mean they don't have free will. A lot of times when people will say, well, if God took away our ability to do evil, we would just be robots. And yet there's all sorts of things. The vast majority of things I could do, I don't do. So, one example I've given before is, my backyard is full of dirt. I could go into my backyard and eat the dirt there. I don't do so, not because I don't have the ability to do so. I certainly could do so. I don't do so because I don't want to. And so there's a range of actions that we are capable of performing, and yet we don't perform them because of our values, our desires, our interests. And those still strike me on any, what I would take to be plausible conception of free will, as falling within the scope of things that are within the ambit of my free will. I could go eat dirt. I have the free will to eat dirt, and I don't because I don't want to. Just the same, in principle, God could create people with a capacity both for free will and with no desire to do evil. They simply don't do evil because they don't want to. Now, if that seems like some sort of an infringement on people's free will, like God is programming them to be a robot by not giving them a particular desire, one of the things I would point out about humans is that most of our desires and our sort of general profile of preferences and dispreferences are already something that over which we have very little voluntary control, and it's largely driven by our underlying biology in the first place. The fact that we like, savory foods and French fries and that sort of thing, and we don't like eating dirt, has something to do with our biology, which we didn't choose. It's not subject to our free will, and so our range of decision making is already restricted by involuntary features of our underlying biology. If that doesn't pose a restriction on our free will, then I don't see why creating people that have no desire to do evil would be a problem for free will. The other point I would make is often when I have discussions about these sorts of things, I will sometimes hear both that God has free will and yet no desire to do evil, and that people in heaven or angels or other sorts of beings, or at least in certain circumstances or places, like when people go to heaven, there's no evil there. They don't do evil there. There's no suffering there. And on the one hand, you can ask, do they have free will there? And if the answer is yes, then it seems like that shows free will is consistent with not doing evil and not wanting to do evil. If, on the other hand, they don't have free will there, that's supposed to be the best place you could be. So what's so great about free will if it's something that we would lose in heaven? On either account, and maybe you have some way of reconciling that issue for me, it seems like our conception of like very good things, heaven, God, they seem like there's no evil, there's no suffering involved, and yet there's still